There is a language that speaks louder than power, a force that moves deeper than logic, a presence that commands more loyalty than authority. That force is empathy. Not the soft kind dressed in pleasantries, not the performative kind offered in exchange for applause, but the raw, soul-bending kind, the kind that sits beside another human soul and says, "I see you. I hear you. You matter." To influence others is not to overpower them. It is to understand them so deeply that they willingly open their hearts to your words, not because they fear you, but because they trust you. True influence is not found in the sound of your voice, but in the silence you hold when someone else is speaking. It's not in the strength of your argument, but in the safety of your presence. Dale Carnegie understood this when he said, "You can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you." He wasn't teaching charm, he was teaching presence. The rare, revolutionary presence of someone who actually cares. And this is where real power begins, not in manipulation, not in charisma, but in connection. Because when you know how someone feels, when you can step into their world and see life from behind their eyes, you don't have to demand influence, it flows to you naturally. Influence is not about control, it's about trust. And trust is built in the spaces between words, in the warmth behind the eyes, in the way you make someone feel safe being human. People are not machines to be hacked, they are oceans to be understood. Every person you meet is fighting a battle you cannot see. Every smile might be hiding a wound. Every anger might be guarding a story. So speak gently. Not because they are fragile, but because life has already been too loud, too cruel, too rushed. The secret to connection is not cleverness, it is curiosity. Not, "How can I win them?" but, "Who are they when no one is watching?" Not, "How can I impress them?" but, "What do they need that no one has given them permission to express?" When you ask questions, ask with your eyes, not just your voice. When you listen, listen to understand, not to reply. Don't seek the opening to speak, seek the stillness to receive. Because in a world obsessed with being heard, the rarest currency is the person who knows how to listen. If you want to influence people, show them that they matter. Not with empty flattery, but with depth. Ask them what excites them, what scares them, what keeps them up at night. And when they answer, don't correct, connect. Don't fix, feel. Empathy is the bridge between souls. It turns strangers into allies, opponents into partners, transactions into trust. And when you learn to walk across that bridge, not only do you reach others, you begin to reach yourself. You start to realize that every face you meet is a mirror, that the way you treat others is a reflection of your relationship with your own heart. If you judge quickly, it is because you have not made peace with your own imperfections. If you interrupt often, it is because you've never been taught the healing power of silence. If you always need to be right, it's because you fear what it means to be vulnerable. But vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is influence in its highest form. Because when you are real, truly real, you give others permission to be human. And that is when hearts begin to open. That is when walls begin to fall. That is when change begins. Influence is not a tactic. It is a truth. It is the truth that human beings are not moved by logic alone. They are moved by love, by safety, by meaning. You can have the best strategy, the sharpest mind, the most impressive credentials, but if you lack empathy, your voice will never touch the soul. So, how do you influence anyone? Start by not trying to influence at all. Start by trying to understand. Start by making it your mission to become the safest place someone has ever encountered. Because people do not remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel when they were most unsure of themselves. Do not underestimate the impact of a gentle word spoken at the right moment. Do not overlook the power of staying when someone is breaking. There are moments in life when presence is more transformative than solutions, when holding space is more sacred than giving advice, when being there is more healing than saying the right thing. In a world of critics, be a sanctuary. In a world of interruptions, be a silence. In a world of performance, be a presence. Because people do not need another person pretending to be perfect. They need someone real enough to remind them they're not alone. And yes, this path will require you to slow down, to put your phone down, to look up, to meet eyes, to resist the urge to impress, and instead, learn to express from the heart, not the ego. You want to influence people. Start by healing yourself. Start by learning how to sit with your own emotions. Because the person who has made peace with their own darkness becomes the lighthouse for others who are still lost in theirs. And never forget this: there is no greater influence than the ability to make someone feel seen without judgment. That is divine. That is rare. That is unforgettable. The loudest voices are often the least secure. True influence doesn't shout, it resonates. It moves quietly through the cracks in people's armor and finds the wounded places. It touches, it holds, and it says, even here, even now, you are enough. Because at the heart of influence is this truth: connection is greater than control. And empathy in action is the most powerful force on earth. Let the world chase popularity. You chase presence, chase depth, chase understanding. And you'll wake up one day realizing you didn't just influence others, you transformed them. And in doing so, you transformed yourself. Now go. Speak not to be heard, speak to heal. Listen not to reply, listen to remember who people truly are beneath the fear. And above all else, live in such a way that when others stand in your presence, they feel like they've come home. Because to be someone's home, even for a moment, is the greatest influence of all. Not to control them, not to convert them, but to comfort them, to remind them of their worth when the world has made them forget. And in doing so, you do something no title, no position, no performance can ever do. You matter. The soul does not respond to hierarchy. It responds to honesty, to gentleness, to the sacred pause before judgment, to the human hand that reaches out not to lead or to teach, but simply to hold. You don't need to be extraordinary to influence others. You need only to be present, real, and awake. We are not here to impress. We are here to connect. And connection, real connection, does not begin with the mouth. It begins with the heart. It does not say, "Let me tell you who I am." It says, "Let me discover who you are." If you seek to be powerful, become interested in people, become fascinated by their stories. Listen not for patterns you can fix, but for the fragile truths they've never spoken aloud. Ask questions that don't just scratch the surface. Ask questions that make people pause, breathe, remember who they were before the world demanded they be something else. And do it with no agenda. That's the key. True influence never demands, it invites. It never manipulates, it mirrors. It says, "Here I am, fully human, and here you are, just the same." You don't influence by changing people. You influence by understanding them. And when people feel deeply understood, they begin to change themselves. Not out of guilt, not out of pressure, but out of a sacred return to who they truly are. So many walk this world screaming to be heard, while so few learn the art of quiet listening. Our thoughts make us what we are, Carnegie said. Then train your thoughts to be curious, compassionate, and slow to condemn. Train your thoughts to look beyond the mask and into the ache. Because everyone wears armor, and if you're patient enough, kind enough, soft enough, you will see the cracks. And through those cracks, you'll see the light of who they really are. Do not mistake empathy for weakness. It is not the soft path, it is the strongest one. It takes more courage to love than to win, more strength to understand than to out-argue, more power to bend your ear than to raise your voice. Because the loudest person in the room is rarely the most certain only, the most insecure, but the one who sees all and judges none, that is influence. The one who asks, what pain lives behind those words? Instead of, how can I make them agree with me? That is a force of nature. You want to change someone's mind, love them where they are. Not as a tactic, but as a truth. People will never accept ideas from those who reject them as people. But once they feel seen, once they feel safe, once they feel heard, you don't even need to persuade them. They'll open themselves. Empathy is not just emotional. It is strategic. It is wise. It is how bridges are built in a world full of walls. It is how battles are ended without violence. It is how cultures evolve, families heal, and lives are transformed not by force, but by presence. And presence is not found in perfection. It is found in attention, in putting down the phone, in facing someone fully, in resisting the urge to fix, to finish their sentence, to solve their life, and instead walking beside them in theirs. There is no faster way to earn trust than to listen without needing to be right. There is no deeper form of respect than to remember someone's pain, not just their words. And there is no higher intelligence than the one that knows how to hold space for another soul in chaos without flinching. Because if you can hold space for someone else, you can influence them in a way the world cannot explain. You'll become unforgettable not for what you did, but for how you made them feel when they were most human. That is the art of influence. That is empathy in action. That is the sacred rebellion of being truly present in a world obsessed with performance. And if you want to test your strength, don't look at how well you speak. Look at how well you listen. Don't measure your impact by how many people follow you. Measure it by how many people feel free to be themselves around you. The ones who change the world are not always the loudest. They are often the ones who sit in the shadows, heal the wounds no one talks about, offer kindness without cameras, and walk away without demanding recognition. Only you can bring peace to yourself, and from that inner peace flows the power to influence without needing to dominate. From that stillness, your presence becomes a healing, not a weapon, not a mask. A healing. You were not born to manipulate people into agreement. You were born to remind them of their own light. That is the greatest influence of all. Not the one who stands above others, but the one who stands beside them, quietly building them up, helping them see themselves clearly, sometimes for the first time. So walk gently, speak truthfully, and live deeply, because in the end, no one will remember your arguments, but they will never forget your empathy, and that your empathy will echo in rooms you've never stepped into. It will linger in hearts long after you've left, because when you touch someone at the level of their soul, they carry your voice inside them. They speak your kindness in their silence. They repeat your wisdom in their solitude. You become a part of their inner landscape, not as a shadow of control, but as a light of remembrance. Empathy isn't a gesture. It's not a smile dipped in obligation or the nod of polite interest. It is presence, undivided, unrushed. It is the courage to say, I don't need to fix you. I just won't let you face this alone. In that moment, you become more than a person. You become a refuge, a lighthouse in the fog of someone's confusion. And when you influence from that place, from that depth, you no longer speak to people's minds. You speak to their meaning. Because influence without empathy is manipulation. Empathy without boundaries is martyrdom. But when empathy meets wisdom, when compassion meets inner clarity, You become an unstoppable force of silent transformation. You want to move the world. Start by moving the human heart beside you. One moment of understanding. One gesture of grace. One truth spoken in love. You don't need a stage to change someone's life. You just need to show up fully. That's where transformation happens, not in the spectacle, but in the sincerity. Most people don't want advice. They want to be seen. Truly seen, not through the lens of judgment or expectation, but through the eyes of someone who recognizes their inherent dignity, even when they've forgotten it themselves. Be that mirror. Be that reminder. Be the one who looks past the performance and notices the pain. Be the one who doesn't flinch when others fall apart. Be the one who doesn't rush to make it better, but dares to make it real. That's the rarest kind of strength. The ability to witness someone fully without looking away. And if you master that, you won't need to raise your voice. The gravity of your presence will speak for you. The softness in your gaze will influence more than 10,000 commands, because people don't follow titles, they follow trust. They follow truth. They follow those who reflect back the parts of themselves that still believe in goodness. And you build that trust not with power, but with patience, not with control, but with curiosity, not with superiority, but with sincerity. Don't ask, how can I convince them? Ask, how can I understand them better? Don't think, what can I say to make them change? Instead, what pain might they be protecting? What truth are they too afraid to say aloud? Because the greatest communicators are not those who speak the best, but those who listen the deepest. And when you truly listen, you become fluent in the language of the heart. You hear the words behind the words, the pauses, the patterns, the tremors in their voice that reveal the cracks in their armor. And that's where you lean in not to point out the weakness, but to offer the strength of presence. You want to be unforgettable. Don't compete. Don't perform. Just be fully there. In a world addicted to attention, your stillness will be magnetic. In a society obsessed with dominance, your gentleness will feel revolutionary. And yes, it takes courage to be open, to be patient, to not rush to win. But remember, success hugs you in private. Failure slaps you in public. So don't measure your impact by how loudly the world responds. Measure it by how deeply you align with your truth. Because influence is not about how many people follow you today. It's about how many lives are forever altered because they met you. The teacher who made a student believe they were worth something. The stranger who smiled when your world was falling apart. The friend who listened without fixing. The parent who said, "I'm proud of you," when you needed it most. The soul who looked at you and said, "You're enough, just as you are." That is influence, and it echoes across lifetimes. So slow down, look people in the eye, say their name with reverence. Let them know they exist not as a task, not as a project, but as a human being worthy of your full attention. Speak life into their silence, dignity into their doubt, hope into the spaces they forgot to water. And in doing so, you won't just influence them, you'll resurrect them. Because the greatest power is not in changing what people think, it's in helping them remember who they are. So don't aim to impress, aim to impact, and never forget. In a world full of noise, the most influential voice is empathy in action. And when you begin to walk in that kind of empathy, steady, grounded, alive, you become a quiet revolution. Not loud, not grandiose, not dramatic, just real, just human. And that is the kind of influence no one can fake, because it radiates from the inside. It doesn't demand recognition, it creates transformation by simply being unshakably true. The people who change lives are rarely the ones standing on a pedestal, shouting into the void. They're the ones who kneel beside the broken without needing to fix them. They're the ones who sit through the silence, who hold your hand when the words won't come, who stay when it would be easier to leave. That's what makes them unforgettable. Not because they forced change, but because they loved you into it. Real influence is not about making someone admire you. It's about making them remember themselves. It's about the friend who looks into your eyes and says, "I see something in you, even if you can't see it yet." It's about the mentor who never gave you the answers, but asked the one question that changed everything. It's about the stranger whose kindness made you feel human again. It's about the person who saw through your performance and didn't run when they met your pain. We are not moved by the best argument. We are moved by the deepest connection. The kind that doesn't just touch the surface, it reaches down to the place inside us where truth still breathes, no matter how long it's been buried. And if you want to build that kind of influence, start by removing the mask. Not just theirs, yours. People don't follow those who are perfect. They follow those who are authentic. They follow those who bleed when they speak, who aren't afraid to admit they don't have it all together, who tell the truth even when it trembles in their throat. Your pain doesn't disqualify you from influence. It qualifies you. Because once you've sat in the dark, you learn how to carry light. Once you've walked through your own fire, you learn how to walk beside someone else in theirs, not with fear, but with sacred familiarity. You become the bridge. You become the proof that healing is possible. Not because you read it in a book, but because you lived it, because you are it. Influence begins when you stop trying to be impressive and start becoming honest. It grows when you stop demanding respect and start offering understanding. It deepens when you stop looking for power and start giving people permission to be seen, to be heard, to be human. So speak less of what you know and more of what you felt. Speak less to be right and more to be real. And when you meet resistance, meet it not with force, but with compassion. For the most difficult people are often the most wounded. The most defensive are often the most abandoned. And the most arrogant, they are simply afraid you'll see who they really are. But when you offer empathy not as a tactic, but as a truth, you make it safe for others to put their walls down. And where the walls fall, change begins, not by arguing louder, not by pushing harder, but by loving deeper. Because real love, is the most dangerous kind of influence. It doesn't force, it frees. It doesn't demand, it invites. And once someone feels that kind of love, they are never the same. So let your life be that invitation. Let your presence be that mirror. Let your words be that warmth that melts the fear from another person's armor. You don't have to change them. Just love them long enough for them to change themselves. And one day, when they're standing tall in their truth, when they're walking freely in the light, they almost forgot they'll remember you. Not because you saved them, but because you saw them. That is empathy in action. That is influence without ego. That is love with its sleeves rolled up, and it starts now. It starts with a choice now to be louder, not to be right, not to be admired, but simply to be present. Present enough to care, present enough to listen, present enough to understand, present enough to heal, because that is what the world needs more than anything right now. Not more experts, not more critics, not more polished performances, but more people willing to be real. People willing to say, "I see you, I hear you, you matter." And when you say that, when you live, that you won't need to influence anyone, they'll feel it, and they'll follow you anyway. They'll follow you, not because you demanded it, but because your presence reminded them of something sacred they had lost along the way themselves. Because in a world full of performers, the one who stands still, bare-souled and honest, becomes magnetic, not by charm, not by strategy, but by truth. And truth doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to decorate itself in empty noise. It walks in quietly, barefoot, bleeding light, and everyone in the room feels it before they even understand it. Because truth, like empathy, bypasses the intellect and touches the soul. That's what influence is meant to be. Not a spotlight, but a torchlit within you, offered to others, passed from hand to trembling hand until the whole room glows with a warmth too holy to explain. But don't confuse warmth with weakness. Kindness does not mean submission. Empathy is not silence in the face of injustice. It is not the absence of boundaries. Sit is their most sacred form. Because when you value people, truly value them, you also value yourself, and you protect both. That's real strength. You can love without losing yourself. You can forgive without forgetting the lesson. You can walk away with grace and still carry compassion in your hands. And sometimes, the greatest act of empathy is not staying, it's knowing when to release. You are not called to carry people who refuse to walk. You are not responsible for healing those who use their wounds as weapons. Empathy doesn't mean self-sacrifice. It means discernment. And discernment means knowing when your love is planting seed sand when it's only watering stones. So don't betray yourself in the name of connection. Because real influence never asks you to abandon your peace. Real love never requires the death of your truth. Yes, there are people you must leave behind, not because they're unworthy, but because they're unwilling. You offered your light. You offered your ears. You showed up real. If they choose shadows, let them. Bless them. And keep walking. The ones who are ready will find you. And when they do, they won't just hear your words. They'll feel your essence. They'll recognize in you a sanctuary they didn't know they needed. Not because you're perfect, but because you're present. Because you're real. Because you've walked through your own hell and now carry water for others. That's influence, not domination, not persuasion, but sacred remembrance. And the more deeply you root yourself in your own empathy, the less you'll need to convince anyone of anything. Your presence will say it all. Your peace will speak volumes. And those who have ears to hear it will lean in. Because influence is not a transaction. It's a transmission. It's what happens when your inner world is so aligned, so still, so quietly radiant that people begin to change simply by standing next to you. Not because you pushed them, but because in your presence, they remembered who they were before the fear set in. So make this your legacy, not how many you led, but how many you lifted. Not how many you taught, but how many you touched. Not how often you were admired, but how deeply you made others feel seen. And if you've done that, if even one person walks away from you more whole than they were before, then you've done something holy. That is the power of empathy in action. That is the kind of influence the world cannot measure. And that is the kind of soul the world can never forget.